Hello and welcome to Link Ahead, the City of Dublin podcast. At some point, probably all of us had described ourselves or our kids or people we know as more left-brained or right-brained.
All right, which are you, Bruce?
I think I'm left. I get
Left?
confused on it.
Right. Well, here in Dublin, we like to think we collectively have a power brain. The left side is analytical, logical, and great with numbers, and yet our right side is imaginative, creative, and great with music and the arts.
All right. Well, our guest today embodies both, too. He's great with numbers and analytics and has a creative, artistic side that's very much on display at his house, in his office, and I think even over at City Hall. We have City Council member Andy Keeler. Welcome to Link Ahead.
Happy to be here.
So glad to have you, and we don't call everyone the power brain, so that's a high praise for you. Let's start topical because we're just coming off the state of the city address. Broadly, how would you describe the state of our city?
I'd say competitive and world class. We're in the catbird seat. We'll seize our fair share of economic development opportunities in the region. I think if you were a corporate, let's say CEO or one of their real estate folks searching the country for a place to call home, both on paper and a short visit to Dublin will tell any company looking to move here that Dublin should be the default community of choice. We recently broadened the scope of the administrative approval criteria and identified opportunities to expand additional staff approvals. What that means is that the folks that are wanting to develop a corporate site here, a commercial site, they have to go through certain steps with our planning department. And we've gotten kind of a bad rap here, a reputation for being very difficult. Our residents appreciate that because they've grown accustomed to a fantastic built environment. But when you're looking to build a building here, time is money, and you want the process to run smoothly. So we're using an administrative review team to evaluate these plans and sort of give check the box type scenario for these developments so that they don't get bogged down in red tape.
Now, Andy, to understand what drove you to run for council and also serve on finance committee, let's talk about your background because this all makes sense. You're a certified financial planner and a founder of your own financial firm. And a little birdie told us in college at Ohio State, you realized you didn't have the math brain for your first love, which was architecture, but you did have the math brain for finance. And it was your college advisor who steered you in that direction, right?
That's right. I like building things, but I started to think about my future in finance. And I pictured myself sort of in office space, stuck in a cubicle, staring at a spreadsheet. Back in the day, it was WordPerfect. Now it's Excel.
I remember
Lotus,
WordPerfect.
Lotus 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
And that's just not me. So I sat down with my advisor and recounted the story that I like building things. I did blueprints for an older brother that was an architect. She said, well, but you're in finance now. And I said, yeah, I kind of like the math, the numbers in finance, dealing with money, but I want to help people. And she said, there's this emerging field called financial planning. And it was like the light bulb went off and I could see how all those courses like psychology might actually mean something. And my grades skyrocketed and the rest is history.
That's awesome.
Wow. Well, and so you have to be able to put that into practice here at the city now. So how are personal finance and municipal finance similar?
Math is math, but finance isn't necessarily finance. So, there are certain things that you can or cannot do in municipal finance that maybe you can do in personal finance. The same principles apply to both. Both have income and expenses. Both involve goal setting. And I would say both involve using other people's money. That's a principle I try to help my clients understand. When you buy a house, very few people in their 20s are paying cash for it.
Sure.
They're borrowing money from a bank. And we can do the same thing here in the city. That's something I think we'll talk a little bit more about later.
So this, Dublin has a AAA bond rating. And for our listeners, think of that as the highest possible credit score you can have. Now, we also have policies in place on borrowing money. So how should we leverage these two things when economic development opportunities arise?
So you use the word leverage, and I use that term in finance to mean borrowing. So having a AAA bond rating means we can borrow other people's money at the lowest possible rates. There's a saying, spend money to make money, and the city is very thoughtful in how and where it spends its money. Sometimes economic development opportunities arise that may require us to issue debt, to borrow, to finance something that will pay us back, and then some in years that follow.
So can you give us an example of a past opportunity where both were leveraged to citizens' benefit?
I'd say Bridge Park is a shining example of that. It's an office park, but it doesn't look like an office park.
Yeah.
It's mixed use, office, retail, some for sale, some for rent. It's an economic development play first, an amenity and source of housing second. It's easier to keep the businesses that we have than to find new ones. And so I think it's important for residents to understand kind of the history of Bridge Park, knowing that we had businesses here, a strong corporate income tax base, and they were sort of crying for help. The folks that they were trying to retain and attract were attracted to places like the Grandview Yard and the Short North and the Arena District. And so to keep those folks, we kind of needed to come up with a new plan. It's also important to note that the Columbus-Franklin County Finance Authority issued more than $286 million in financing to support multiple parts of Bridge Park. I'll say that again, the Columbus-Franklin County Finance Authority, not the City of Dublin. That's important for two reasons. First, it showcases the collaboration of efforts between Dublin and the rest of the Central Ohio community, understanding that rising tides raise all ships. This is not an us versus them or an I versus you. It's a we thing. We're all in this thing together. The second reason is that the notion that the City of Dublin is on the hook for any perceived financial risk with respect to Bridge Park is simply a myth.
Now, you've said this before. It's vital that residents understand how Dublin is able to provide our world-class amenities, especially compared to our neighboring cities and towns. So can you talk about that just for a little bit?
So I hear a lot from folks, my taxes are really high. And the example I use, and Matt Stifler would probably tell me my math isn't entirely correct. I'm rounding a bit, but if you pay $10,000 a year in property taxes on your house, the city receives about $200. So that doesn't even pay for your trash pickup, your recycling, the chipper, let alone the parks, the other amenities, and about 130, 150 miles of shared use paths, who's counting. When we started talking about spending on a new project, using taxpayers' money, I always pause because a lot of people say, well, we have to be careful because it's taxpayers' money. It makes me think. The fact is that most of the tax revenue that's generated here is generated by folks that work here, but they don't live here. And that's the beautiful part of the formula. So one way to look at it is that much of the city's finances are subsidized by those living in other communities, not as much by those that live here and enjoy the lion's share of the amenities. So it's imperative that we preserve and continue to build upon the tax base afforded to us by these corporate citizens. And it's also important to note, as Matt Stifler pointed out when he was making the pie references in the State of the City, that our 2% income tax is lower than many other municipalities in the region.
Right, absolutely. Well, we are currently wrapping up Envision Dublin, the update to the city's community plan. In fact, for one of our On the Road episodes of Link Ahead last year, we recorded a town hall discussion with experts helping us put together that plan. And one of the consultants said, you can't do nothing and stay the same. And that really stuck with me. And is that a foundational statement in your mind that we as a city should always be evolving in some way?
So it's interesting that you bring this up. Somebody must have heard me using that exact reference with other residents when talking about growth, and that kind of thing, as I've talked about a little bit earlier. Let's face it, change isn't always a good thing, and it can be scary. But just to keep providing these amenities that I've been talking about, that we've all grown accustomed to, let alone afford residents the new ones, the next new thing, the next bright thing. Growth doesn't have to mean sprawl. It doesn't have to have significant impacts on the built environment. It's possible to have significant growth in tax revenue without a significant impact on the Dublin we see and experience every day. As I said earlier, attracting our fair businesses that choose to call Dublin home is key to keeping the standard of living to which Dublin residents have grown accustomed to and look to the elected officials to keep providing. This has become increasingly clear post-pandemic. Working from home really could have had a significant impact on our income tax revenue. Thankfully, our economic development team has done a great job backfilling, and given that wages and salaries have increased along with strong corporate earnings, our income tax revenue once again exceeded $100 million in 2023, now the third year in a row.
Now, speaking of, we're always growing in Dublin, we're always like the new shiny thing you were talking about. Future plans. Council is considering the Performing Arts a cultural arts center for Dublin. What do you like about this?
I can go on and on about it. I would say what's interesting is after we started the conversation about a performing arts center, we engaged in a parks and recreation master plan. And in that plan, there were a number of, needs or amenities that residents wanted that kind of exposed gaps in or chinks in our armor. It was just fortuitous that this happened because, I think a lot of folks out there might question the need for a city to support the arts because the arts are typically supported by philanthropy, not as much cities. But we're competitive. I said, that's one word I would use to describe the city of Dublin. We're competitive. Right now, we have a 200-seat Abbey Theater. Our neighbors in Marysville recently renovated a 250-seat Avalon Theater. Up in Worthington, they have 213 seats, but they also have gallery spaces, 4 classrooms, a dance studio, a ceramic studio, and out in New Albany, our friends have 786 seats in the McCoy Center. So, if we're trying to be competitive and we want to attract professionals, C-suite executives from big companies, we need strong education base, but we also need culture and arts and entertainment. The Dublin Arts Council has a very limited area in terms of the square footage of gallery space that they have. So, if you think about it, the amount of exhibits or the size of the exhibits they could have and the number of visitors, if you're in a high traffic area, I think we could increase a lot.
You've been a really vocal supporter of this idea, and this might sound like an obvious question, but what are the challenges to it?
Finding the money.
I thought you might say that.
$100 million is a lot of money. Using the Columbus Symphony Orchestra Performance Hall as a template, I think it's a combination of public, private, state, and federal grants and philanthropy. And I think that the last time that we looked at this back in 2017, we may have overlooked some of that state and federal money. This really needs to be a grassroots effort, and there will be something for everyone.
Wow. Well, what else do you foresee for Dublin's future?
A mind-blowing version 2.0 of Metro Center.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I'm so excited about it. Bridge Park is the envy of the nation, really, but the nation is catching up. I mean, we see other cities from around the country and even around the world visiting Bridge Park. We see developments like Bridge Park happening in the city, the surrounding city of Columbus, and around the nation. I like to be a trailblazer, and so for me, it's kind of like what's next. I think Metro Center has the potential to be an encore to Bridge Park. Can I say I want a North Star Cafe?
Oh,
yes.
I support
yes, you can say that.
I feel like Dublin needs a North Star. Yep.
A hot chicken takeover?
Yeah.
Right?
Should go in the North Market.
It's true.
I know.
It's true.
Maybe a
Delicious.
locally owned deli or wine shop. A Graders 2.0.
Oh, I missed
If I'm dreaming big, a Nike and Apple store.
Right.
I know.
Sounds great.
Green space for recreation, bicycle and scooter friendly. I mean, it has to be walkable for those that want to live, work, and play there. And a combination of surface parking for patrons of the first floor businesses and other businesses catering to older adults. And our thoroughfare plan, that's another thing we've been talking about on council. Our thoroughfare plan will incorporate a bridge over 270 connecting Metro Center to Rings Road. I think this is news to a lot of residents, but imagine renting a scooter in Bridge Park, riding it, let's say, to a performance at a performing arts center in Metro Center, and then on to Dari Fields for an event of some sort. You got to dream big.
I like it. I like where we're going here now. Now, before we get any more big ideas, let's come back to the personal side. You're big on volunteerism. And again, broadly, why do you volunteer?
I'd say Dublin isn't so much a city, it's a community. And it's truly remarkable. We saw our diehard residents come out in force for our annual St. Patrick's Day parade on a day where the weather, well, it wasn't great. I've got some words to describe it, but the last minute, things turned out all right.
Sure. Yep.
It's like the clouds parted for us. I'm a member of Dublin AM Rotary, and that day you would have spotted a bunch of our members in orange vests marshaling the crowds, making sure the little kids didn't get too far out into the street, going after that candy. I would have marshaled too had it not been for my position on council. And honestly, if you asked me twice, I'd much rather prefer serving the community hands-on than walking in the parade.
No, you don't like passing out the candy?
That's the only good thing about
the
it.
kids love that. Well, we mentioned your creative side. You are a master woodworker. You build fine furniture and cabinetry. Where did this spark come from?
When I was about 8, my dad would go down into his workshop in the basement, and I'd kind of tag along, and I'd take the scraps of wood that he would cut off stuff, and I'd pound nails into it. Sort of grew from there. My mom would ask for a pie chest or a cupboard. We lived in a really old house, 150-year-old house. So she'd say, "Hey, Andy, will you redo this bedroom?" And so I would recreate the trim that house had. I made the bed that I sleep in nearly 30 years ago in my parents' carriage house.
Wow.
Yeah, no heat. It was like I was a pioneer or something.
Indoor plumbing?
No, not in the carriage house.
Okay.
It was basically a barn.
Okay.
Cold days. I did that over the winter. I think it was like 1996 or something like that. But my tastes have changed over the years. Today I enjoy more simple lines, which, as you can imagine, are easier to build or buy at IKEA. I still draw my plans by hand using only a pencil.
That is impressive. And I've seen the piece over in the council chambers, or not in the chambers, but in one of the meeting rooms, the table you put together. That is impressive.
Absolutely gorgeous.
It's dry in that building. And I don't know if you folks have noticed, but I felt kind of bad because the table that I made, it was installed, I think, in August or September, late summer. And when the winter came, it gets dry inside buildings.
Yeah.
It's very dry over there. Wood is always moving. It's kind of, a living thing. And so it's kind of a challenge to design something and build something that kind of takes the expansion and contraction of the seasons.
And, talking about that piece, you have a lot of nice stuff. When are we going to see a public art of Andy Keeler in Dublin? Is that going to be debut at the Performance Center that we build? Or
you don't have to ask me twice or dare me. I think as soon as Dr. Guillaume of the Dublin Arts Council gives me the green light. So driving down Riverside Drive in particular, between Emerald Parkway and Bridge Park, there are a number of these utility boxes. They're large utility boxes. And some of them have kind of fading paint. Some are brown, some are green. But, we kind of have this, we kind of have a sterile city. A lot of the things that you see are just so perfect and I guess clean. And I like that to a degree. But I think it adds visual interest if you can have little pops of color here and there.
Sure.
And a number of us visited Carmel, Indiana, and Franklin, Tennessee, and they've done a lot with parking garages, murals on the walls there, different colored fire hydrants, the utility boxes, and things like that. I'd say Valentina's did a great job with that tile mosaic,
Yep.
but this kind of thing, it sparks imagination, creativity, and creates a lot of positive energy. Nobody looks at that kind of stuff and says, I hate my life right now. It's like, whether you say something or not, I get a smile on my face when I see it.
Well, some people listen to music to unwind or blow off steam, others work out. I'm wondering if woodworking provides an outlet for you after a tough day.
So I actually start every day working out and listening to music. So that's kind of how I get my brain going. The woodworking, working on the various cars that I have, that's sort of an end of the day thing. I kind of think of that as my yoga
Yeah.
or meditation exercises. But it's certainly good to do that after a long day's work.
All right. Well, this is an easy segue into our final segment of every episode. It's rapid fire. So let's stay on the theme of numbers and woodworking here.
Okay.
I like it.
What's the hardest piece of furniture or cabinetry technically you've crafted, and why was it so hard?
I have a desk in my home office that I built out of curly maple. If you know anything about wood, you know that you do everything with the grain, right? You sand with the grain, you carve with the grain, you do everything with the grain. Well, curly maple, the grain is curly. The grain goes everywhere.
Wow.
So it's a challenge to work with. As I said, my tastes have changed, but when I built that desk, I really liked kind of period reproduction furniture, like late 1800s, American style stuff. This particular desk has these things called tombstones. So they're panels, raised panels, and they're shaped like a tombstone. And carving that tombstone in curly maple was a huge challenge for me. I also cut all the dovetails by hand. So the drawers, it's got, 7 drawers. All the drawer joints I did by hand using a dovetail saw and chisels.
Wow.
So
Okay.
pain and agony.
All right, okay. Now, what's the tool in your garage shop that you cannot live without?
A vehicle lift. That's my dream. That's my dream. So I collect old cars, performance cars, and having a lift that I could use to store the cars, but also get under the cars to work on them.
Sure.
That's something that's on my wish list.
Okay, back to the left brain now. What's the number one mistake people make with their finances?
Buying a vacation home while on vacation.
It sounds like a fantasy to me. I love that.
You're kind of in fantasy land when you're on vacation. You're detached from reality. The dogs are in the kennel. You're not paying any bills, right? And you're probably in an environment that's new and exciting to you. Maybe it's warmer or sunnier. So there's a tendency to want to, gosh, let's live here.
Right. Okay, let's stay in fantasy land for 1 second. You win the Mega Millions. Could you, as a CFP, make a silly purchase?
You betcha. So the majority of my clients are either at what I would call high net worth or ultra high net worth. So they can afford to make some not so financially savvy decisions.
Okay.
And I could
I think
do
I
the
need
same
a new
thing.
finance guy.
Yeah, I think we have to have the finances to hire him is what we need.
That's what
Lindsay.
I'm saying. Okay, so what would you buy?
A vacation home while on vacation.
Wow. Way to wrap that one up. Okay, we have to ask, what is your favorite place to meet a client?
That's a tough one.
I know it's not North Star.
Right. Well, that is. I just don't do it very
Oh
often.
boy, we're going to edit that out.
I would say Valentina's is a great spot. It's
Wow.
lunch hour. It's not super busy. It's pretty quiet, and the food's great.
What's your favorite park?
Cider Park. So Leather Lips. I love art. I love creating things. I've done masonry work myself, and so I just can't ever get enough of it. When I look at that sculpture, that artwork,
That's impressive.
every nook and cranny, and thinking about setting every one of those stones, it just kind of blows my mind.
That and the time of day, it looks different based on the light. Now, have you gone up and seen the giant snails at the Arts Council?
I've
Ooh.
driven past.
Okay, all right.
Earlier, you were talking about pops of color.
That is
you've got
something.
Yeah, that's got it. We just
Pops
need
of
more
color.
of it.
Yep.
We need snails everywhere,
There we go.
not
You
just
heard it here
at the Dublin
first.
Arts Council.
All right. Lastly, whether it's volunteering, working for Dublin, or joining a civic group, what's your elevator pitch to get more people involved throughout our great city?
I'd say behind every great community are volunteers. And the city is what it is truly because of the people. The more involved each and every one of us are, the better we'll all be.
That's a great note to end on.
Absolutely.
City Council member Andy Keeler, thanks for taking the time to join us.
And to our listeners, thank you as well for taking time to connect with your city. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the many personalities and experiences that make Dublin a thriving place to live, work, and grow.